Have you ever stopped to consider the unsettling possibility that you may not be living the life you chose, but the life someone else quietly planted inside you? Not violently, not intentionally, not through control or force, but through a sentence casually dropped, a look of disappointment, a comparison made in silence, a warning disguised as concern, a headline soaked in fear. And the most disturbing part is this: almost no one realizes when it happens, because influence rarely announces itself. The truth is uncomfortable and liberating at the same time. Much of what you believe about yourself, about the world, and about your future did not originate inside you. It came from the outside. It entered slowly. It stayed quietly. It took root. And today it governs decisions you were convinced are your own. At some point, someone may have said, "You're difficult. You're slow. You're not good with money. You're too emotional. You're unrealistic. You'll never make it." You might have laughed. You might have shrugged it off. You might have said, "That's not true." But your brain didn't dismiss it. Your brain archived it, not as an opinion, but as data. Years later, you still act as if that sentence were law, not because you chose it, but because you were never taught how to filter what enters your mind. The human mind is extraordinarily powerful, and precisely because of that, extraordinarily vulnerable. It learns through repetition, and it learns through authority. When a message comes from someone that matters, a parent, a teacher, a leader, a boss, a friend, it doesn't just pass through you, it sinks deeper. It becomes identity. It becomes internal narrative. It becomes who you think you are. And that's where the silent cycle begins. You don't fail because you are incapable. You fail because you live convinced that you are. You don't experience lack because the world conspired against you. You experience lack because you adopted a scarcity mindset without realizing it. You're not stuck because opportunity doesn't exist. You're stuck because an internal filter, shaped by external stimuli, keeps blocking movement. And this doesn't just happen to individuals. It happens collectively. The world is constantly shouting inside your head. You turn on the television, you open your phone. Crisis, war, inflation, collapse, fear, uncertainty. None of this is fake. None of this is imaginary. But the error isn't in seeing these things. The error is turning global headlines into personal destiny. The country is in crisis becomes, "My life will always be unstable." Things are getting harder becomes, "For me, everything will always be hard." No one is succeeding becomes, "I never will either." And without noticing, you allow information to become identity, context to become a sentence, environment to become fate. You stop living as someone free and begin living as someone conditioned. This is exactly why Romans 12:2 warns, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This is not distant religious language. It is an instruction for internal governance. Paul is saying, the world will try to shape you, but you don't have to accept its mold. The mind is fertile soil. Whatever falls there grows. If fear grows, if comparison grows, if scarcity grows. And the more you water it with emotion and repetition, the more real it becomes in lived experience. Maybe as you're hearing this, something feels uncomfortably familiar. That quiet sensation of, "This explains so much." Because you begin to realize you haven't just been reacting to life, you've been reacting to ideas that were never yours to begin with. Jesus understood this with astonishing clarity. He didn't fight the world, he filtered what entered him. He wasn't governed by opinions, he wasn't driven by pressure, he wasn't shaped by rumors. He stayed aligned internally before acting externally. And that is the kind of mental authority you were meant to learn. The problem is not that external things reach you, they always will. The problem is when you allow everything to become truth inside you. This is where the shift begins. Because there's an invisible mechanism operating in your life. External stimulus enters, belief forms, emotion is generated, decisions are shaped, habits are built, and reality is constructed. If this mechanism remains unconscious, you spend your life trying to fix the outside without ever touching the inside. But once you understand it, everything changes. Because you realize the real battlefield is not the world around you, it's what you allow to live within you. Your mind doesn't exist in a vacuum. No one thinks alone. Every thought is born in an environment. Every belief was exposed before it was chosen. Every emotion was stimulated before it was felt. The greatest mistake people make is not being influenced. It's failing to notice by whom and why. From early on, you were trained to absorb without filtering. Opinions arrived as truths. Diagnoses arrived as sentences. Comments arrived as identity. Slowly, quietly, you began confusing what you heard with who you are. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process, a daily repetition, an invisible accumulation. Psychology explains that the brain does not evaluate truth first. It evaluates impact first. Only later does it rationalize. That's why one criticism can outweigh 10 compliments. That's why one bad piece of news can dominate your entire day, even if nothing directly happened to you. Now expand that to the world we live in. Never before has humanity had so much access to information, never so much opinion, never so much noise, and never so much collective anxiety. The problem is not that the world is chaotic. The problem is allowing the chaos of the world to become the internal climate of your mind. You wake up, and before remembering who you are in God, you are reminded of everything wrong with the planet. Before hearing the voice of Christ, you've already heard the voice of fear. Before aligning your identity, you've absorbed scarcity, threat, urgency. And then you spend the rest of the day trying to protect yourself from something that entered without your conscious permission. Jesus taught something radically different. He lived in a hostile environment, politically unstable, religiously charged, emotionally volatile. Yet he was not governed by it. He walked through crowds without absorbing the crowd's mentality. He heard accusations without internalizing them. He faced threats without letting them shape him. Why? Because the center of his mind was not outside. It was anchored in the Father. When Jesus said, "Do not fear," he wasn't denying reality. He was teaching where the mind must rest. Fear does not come from what happens. It comes from the meaning assigned to what happens. And whoever controls that meaning governs your life. Here is a truth that must be said clearly. The world is constantly trying to define who you are and what you should expect from life. If you don't interrupt that process, you end up living a story God never wrote. News speaks of crisis, and you begin to feel scarcity even when nothing is missing. People project insecurity, and you begin to doubt yourself. Environments live in urgency, and you begin to live anxious. None of this happens because you are weak. It happens because you are human. Neuroscience calls this emotional contagion. Emotions spread faster than information. If the environment carries fear, your brain synchronizes. If it carries comparison, you measure yourself constantly. If it carries scarcity, you begin to play small. And here is where Jesus' teaching, often ignored, becomes central. Guard what enters. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." In biblical language, the heart is not just emotion. It is the center of thought, decision, and direction. To guard the heart is to filter stimuli, to refuse to let every narrative become internal truth. Most people live the opposite way. They let everything enter and try to fix the damage later. They pray after the mind is already contaminated. They try to have faith after fear has settled in. They try to trust after anxiety has taken control. Jesus taught mental prevention, not just emotional healing. Look at his pattern. Before major decisions, he withdrew. Before confrontation, he prayed. Before action, he aligned. This wasn't religiosity. It was spiritual and psychological strategy. If you don't consciously decide what enters your mind, someone else will decide for you. And that someone else rarely wants your growth. They want your attention, your fear, your compliance. Here's a liberating truth. Not every thought that passes through your mind belongs to you. Thoughts are stimuli. They arrive. You decide whether they stay. 2 Corinthians 10:5 tells us to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. That means you don't negotiate with destructive thoughts. You don't debate fear. You don't entertain doubt. You identify, you confront, you replace. Thinking something doesn't mean believing it. Thinking is exposure. Believing is permission. A negative comment is just a stimulus until you accept it. A frightening headline is just information until you internalize it. Fear knocking is not a prison unless you open the door. Jesus never accepted external stimuli as identity. When they called him nearly a carpenter's son, he didn't shrink. When they tried to provoke him to prove himself, he refused. When they accused him, he remained silent, not weak, but anchored. Isaiah 26:3 reveals the secret. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. A steadfast mind is not one that ignores the world. It is one that refuses to let the world occupy the throne within. Now, let me ask you something, honestly. How many decisions in your life were made in response to fear someone planted in you? Maybe you didn't try because they said it was too hard. Maybe you didn't begin because they said it wasn't the right time. Maybe you didn't prosper because you accepted the idea that prosperity wasn't for you. These stimuli didn't arrive screaming. They arrived dressed as realism. But Jesus never taught you to live by fear disguised as wisdom. He taught you to live by faith aligned with truth. In Mark 4, Jesus describes the kingdom as seeds. Seeds are small, but they grow according to the soil. Stimuli are seeds, thoughts are seeds, narratives are seeds, and the soil is your mind. If you don't choose what to plant, anything will grow. That's why scarcity spreads so quickly. It doesn't begin with money, it begins with thinking. People repeat phrases like, "No one is making it," "Everything is getting worse." That becomes a collective mantra, and the brain learns through repetition. But Jesus spoke a different language. He spoke abundance in the middle of lack, provision before miracles, faith before evidence. Because he knew what dominates the mind precedes what manifests in reality. And here is where everything shifts. You don't have to consume everything presented to you. You can choose when to watch the news. You can choose who has access to your mind. You can choose the first thought of your day. That is spiritual maturity. Jesus said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Not every sound deserves entry. Not every voice deserves space. Not every piece of information deserves to be carried. And this is where we'll go deeper next. In the next part, we'll uncover how to reprogram the mind daily, how Jesus taught mental alignment without religious overload, and how the first moments of your day determine whether you live reacting or governing. For now, pause here. Let this settle. Because if this truth lands, your life will never be approached the same way again. There is a principle operating quietly in your life that almost no one is taught to recognize. It is simple, but decisive. Whoever speaks first inside you governs the rest of the day. Not the loudest voice, not the most logical one, the first one. Because the mind, especially in its early moments, is not neutral. It is receptive, plastic, highly suggestible. And this is where most people lose authority over their own inner world before the day has even begun. You wake up. Before you remember who you are, you reach for your phone. Before you anchor your identity, you absorb urgency. Before you align with truth, you are exposed to noise. Messages, notifications, news, comparisons, deadlines, expectations, and none of it is neutral. Each stimulus plants a seed. By the time you finally try to pray, reflect, or focus, your internal climate is already set. You are no longer governing, you are reacting. Jesus never lived this way. He didn't start his days defending himself against what the world had already planted inside him. He positioned his interior before engaging the exterior. This is not mysticism. This is architecture. The brain, upon waking, transitions through a state where critical filters are lowered. Modern neuroscience calls it a hypnagogic window. Scripture addressed it long before science had language for it. Joshua 1:8 says, "Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it." This wasn't ritual, it was mental design. Jesus understood that if the first stimulus came from the Father, everything else would be filtered through that alignment. That's why he often withdrew in the early hours, not to escape people, but to prepare himself not to be shaped by them. There is a profound difference between isolation and alignment. Isolation avoids pressure. Alignment neutralizes it. Most people live in a state of constant mental trespassing. They don't decide who enters, they just react to whoever knocks, and then they wonder why peace is fragile. Here is something that may challenge you. Many of the thoughts you believe are your own were never chosen, they were absorbed. The urgency you feel, the anxiety that seems to appear without cause, the quiet sense that you're behind, late, lacking. These are often not spiritual issues. They are environmental infections. Jesus did not fight symptoms. He governed sources. Seek first the kingdom of God, Matthew 3:33. This is not just about faith. It is about order. First means first, not later, not after scrolling, not after panic. First. Because what comes first establishes hierarchy. If fear speaks first, faith spends the day trying to recover. If scarcity speaks first, abundance feels unrealistic. If comparison speaks first, identity becomes unstable. But if truth speaks first, everything else is evaluated, not absorbed. Now here is where many people misunderstand renewal of the mind. They think it means replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. That is shallow. The mind does not change through slogans, it changes through patterns. You cannot declare peace in the morning and feed anxiety all night. The brain does not learn by exceptions, it learns by repetition. Jesus did not live on emotional highs, he lived on consistent alignment. He did not react to chaos, he organized it through presence. When the storm came, he slept. Not because the storm wasn't real, but because his interior was not governed by it. Isaiah 26:3 becomes real here. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast. Steadfast does not mean stubborn, it means anchored. Here is the subtle shift that changes everything. You don't fight stimuli, you assign meaning to them. The stimulus itself has no authority, the interpretation does. A criticism can be an attack or a test of maturity. A crisis can be a threat or an invitation to trust. Pressure can be fear or confirmation of growth. Same stimulus, different ruler. Proverbs 23:7 says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." This is not wishful thinking, this is neurological reality. Belief shapes behavior, shapes outcomes. If you believe you are always late, you live rushed. If you believe you are unlucky, you make defensive decisions. If you believe God has abandoned you, you act alone. But if you believe you are guided, you move with courage. If you believe provision exists, you act with confidence. If you believe your mind is sacred ground, you guard it. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Many voices you fear have no power over you. They only gain power when you agree with them. When someone diminishes you, that is sound in the air until you internalize it. When the world speaks crisis, that is context until you adopt it as destiny. When fear knocks, it is a visitor until you give it keys. 2 Corinthians 10:5 tells us to take thoughts captive. Not argue with them, not entertain them, capture them. This is not self-aggression. This is self-leadership. Your mind is a gate. Not every visitor deserves entry. Jesus practiced discernment, not avoidance. He listened, but did not absorb. He engaged, but did not internalize. That is mental authority. Now here is the most practical turning point. You must decide the first mental gesture of your day, not as a heavy ritual, as governance. Before the phone, before the news, before external voices, pause, breathe, and consciously declare alignment. Not to convince God, to position yourself. When you begin the day saying, "My mind belongs to Christ," you are not denying reality. You are choosing who interprets it. From that center, you will still face problems, but they won't rule you. You will still hear criticism, but it won't define you. You will still face challenges, but they won't destabilize you, because the center is already anchored. Jesus never promised a storm-free life. He promised a steady mind within the storm. And that steadiness is built through small daily decisions. This is where responsibility and relief meet. You are not a victim of the world. You are the guardian of your inner world. And that realization is power. In the next part, we will go deeper into how environments program belief, why emotional contagion is stronger than logic, and how to break unconscious mental agreements that were formed years ago. Because once you see how the conditioning happened, you gain authority to undo it. There is a hidden layer beneath your thoughts that almost no one ever examines. It operates silently. It shapes behavior without asking permission, and it influences outcomes long before logic gets involved. These are mental agreements, unspoken, unconscious, often formed years before you had the maturity to question them. You didn't sit down one day and decide to believe them. You absorbed them. An agreement is formed whenever a stimulus is repeated with emotion, authority, or survival relevance. The brain interprets repetition as importance, emotion as urgency, authority as truth. And once an agreement is formed, the mind stops questioning it. It treats it as reality. This is why two people can live in the same world and experience entirely different realities. Same economy, same news, same environment, but radically different internal narratives. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat. One moves forward, the other freezes. The difference is not intelligence, it's agreement. At some point, one agreed internally to a story the other never accepted. Here's what makes this difficult to see. Agreements don't feel like beliefs. They feel like how things are. I'm just being realistic. That's just how life works. I know myself. This is just my personality. But many of these statements are not truth. They are contracts written in the language of familiarity. And familiarity is the most convincing liar of all. Let's go back to how this begins. As children, our minds are wide open. We don't analyze, we absorb. The brain prioritizes belonging and safety over accuracy. If an environment repeatedly communicates, "Don't stand out, be careful," people like us don't succeed. Money causes problems. Dreaming leads to disappointment. The child doesn't debate. The child adapts, because adaptation equals survival. Those adaptations later become limitations, not because they were wrong then, but because they were never updated. This is why Jesus said, "Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom." He was not talking about immaturity. He was talking about plasticity, the ability to unlearn, the ability to release agreements that no longer serve life. Now let's talk about environments. Environments train the nervous system before they train the intellect. You don't need to be told something explicitly to learn it. You learn through tone, through reactions, through what is celebrated and what is punished. If an environment responds to risk with fear, the nervous system learns avoidance. If success is met with criticism, the nervous system learns to shrink. If scarcity is normalized, the nervous system learns to hold back. This is why you can logically believe something is possible and still feel unable to move toward it. Logic and agreement are not the same system. Agreements live deeper. They live in the emotional brain. And this is why emotional contagion is so powerful. Emotions don't need explanation. They spread automatically. If fear is present long enough, it becomes baseline. If urgency is constant, calm feels unsafe. If comparison is normal, peace feels lazy. Now look at the world we live in, an economy of attention. Fear keeps people watching. Outrage keeps people engaged. Urgency keeps people scrolling. And without noticing, your nervous system is being trained daily, not intentionally, but effectively. You don't just hear the news, you absorb its emotional tone, and tone shapes belief faster than facts. This is why Jesus taught vigilance, not isolation. He did not tell people to ignore the world. He taught them not to internalize it. Watch and pray, not panic and react. Watch means observe without absorbing. Pray means align before interpreting. That is mental sovereignty. Now here is the breakthrough most people never reach. You don't need to fight old agreements. You need to expose them. Agreements lose power when brought into awareness, because many of them were formed under false assumptions. You were young, you lacked context, you needed safety. The agreement made sense then. It may not now. Ask yourself quietly, what do I assume will always go wrong? Where do I automatically expect lack? What do I feel I must protect myself from? Those reactions point to agreements, not truth. Agreements explain why prayer sometimes feels blocked, not because God is silent, but because the mind is already decided. You don't hear what contradicts an agreement easily. This is why Jesus often said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Not everyone hears the same message, because not every mind is open to receive it. Now let's address something crucial. Renewing the mind is not about adding new information. It is about breaking unconscious loyalty to old narratives. Some beliefs stay, not because they are true, but because they are familiar. The nervous system prefers known pain over unknown freedom. This is why people return to patterns that hurt them, not because they enjoy suffering, but because it feels predictable. Jesus disrupted this constantly. He healed on the Sabbath. He touched the unclean. He redefined worth. Why? Because he was breaking agreements. Agreements about who mattered. Agreements about what was allowed. Agreements about what God was like. And people resisted him not because he was wrong, but because he threatened the agreements that structured their world. Now bring this inward. Some of your resistance to change is not fear of failure. It's fear of violating an internal agreement. If I succeed, I'll be judged. If I grow, I'll be rejected. If I rest, I'll lose control. These agreements operate silently, until you name them. And here is where Scripture becomes surgical. Romans 12:2 does not say change your behavior. It says be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation is not effort, it is reconfiguration. And reconfiguration starts with awareness. Jesus never forced change. He revealed truth, and truth disrupted agreements. Now let's talk about the most common agreement of all: scarcity. Scarcity is not an economic condition, it is a mental posture. It begins with repetition. There's not enough. It's risky. Others have, I don't. This is just how it is. The brain turns this into expectation. Expectation is into behavior. Behavior turns into outcome, and the cycle reinforces itself. Jesus confronted scarcity directly. 5 loaves, 2 fish, thousands of people. He didn't start with lack. He started with gratitude. Why? Because gratitude breaks the agreement of insufficiency. He lifted what was there, not what was missing, and the agreement shifted. Abundance followed. This was not magic, it was meaning. Now understand this carefully. You cannot break agreements emotionally. You break them consciously, by choosing a different interpretation, by assigning a new meaning, by refusing automatic conclusions. This takes practice, but it is learnable, and once learned, it is irreversible. In the next part, we will move into daily mental reprogramming, how to create a personal filter aligned with Christ, and how to stop signing agreements without reading them. Because once you stop agreeing unconsciously, your life begins to respond consciously. There is something most people misunderstand about the mind. They think the mind changes through big moments, a breakthrough, a crisis, a revelation. But the mind is not reprogrammed by intensity. It is reprogrammed by consistency. What shapes you is not what shocks you. It is what you repeatedly allow. Jesus never relied on emotional peaks to sustain alignment. He lived by rhythm, by pattern, by daily positioning. This is why so many people experience powerful moments with God and yet return to the same internal patterns days later. The moment was real, but the system was unchanged. The mind obeys systems, not intentions. And the system most people live under is unconscious exposure. Let's talk about how reprogramming actually happens. Every day, your mind receives thousands of micro-stimuli: images, tones, phrases, expressions, silences. Each one slightly reinforces or weakens a belief. You don't need to consciously agree. Your nervous system does it automatically. This is why Jesus emphasized vigilance, not paranoia, awareness. Be careful how you hear. Not just what you hear, but how. Because how you hear determines how it lands. Now here's something few people realize. The mind has no delete button. It only overwrites. You don't remove beliefs by attacking them. You remove them by starving them and feeding something else consistently. This is why resistance alone doesn't work. If you try to stop thinking negatively without installing a new pattern, the old one returns. Not because you failed, but because nothing replaced it. Jesus understood this principle when he spoke about unclean spirits leaving and returning to an empty house. The problem wasn't the spirit leaving, it was the emptiness. An unoccupied mind defaults to old tenets. Now let's get practical. Reprogramming the mind happens in 3 layers: input, interpretation, repetition. Most people only try to change interpretation, but they keep feeding the same input. That creates internal conflict. You cannot heal a nervous system that is constantly re-exposed to threat. This is why some people pray deeply and then immediately flood their mind with fear-based content. The prayer aligns, the content destabilizes, and the nervous system chooses what feels more frequent, not what feels more true. This is why Jesus didn't just teach beliefs, he modeled lifestyle. He chose silence, he chose solitude, he chose measured engagement. not withdrawal, discernment. Now let's talk about mental diet. Just as your body responds to what you eat, your mind responds to what you consume. You don't need to eat poison to feel sick. You just need to eat poorly, consistently. Likewise, you don't need to believe lies explicitly. You just need to consume fear long enough. Your mind doesn't ask, is this true? It asks, is this familiar? And familiarity creates comfort, even when it creates damage. This is why peace feels uncomfortable to some people, because chaos became familiar. Jesus often withdrew not because he was tired, but because he refused to let constant noise recalibrate his nervous system. He protected his baseline. And baseline determines reaction speed. If your baseline is anxiety, everything feels urgent. If your baseline is scarcity, every opportunity feels risky. If your baseline is comparison, nothing feels enough. But if your baseline is alignment, pressure loses authority. Now here is where discipline becomes liberation. You don't need to control every thought. You need to control what trains your thoughts. That's a crucial difference. You don't fight birds flying over your head. You stop them from building nests. The birds are stimuli. The nest is agreement. And nests are built through repetition. Now let's talk about morning and night, the two most programmable windows of the day. Science confirms it. Scripture anticipated it. When you wake up, your brain is suggestible. When you fall asleep, it consolidates memory. What you expose yourself to during these windows is magnified. Jesus taught meditation day and night, not as religious duty, but as neurological wisdom. Now consider how most people live. They wake up to urgency. They sleep to distraction. Fear enters first. Noise seals last. And they wonder why peace feels distant. Here is a gentle but firm truth. You cannot live a governed life with an ungoverned routine. Freedom is not the absence of structure, it is the presence of the right structure. Jesus lived the most free life imaginable and also the most disciplined internally. He chose when to engage, he chose when to withdraw, he chose when to speak, he chose when to remain silent. That is authority. Now let's address something sensitive. Many people think guarding the mind means avoiding reality. It does not. It means choosing timing and dosage. You don't have to consume every headline immediately. You don't have to respond to every message instantly. Urgency is not obedience. Silence is not irresponsibility. Jesus delayed responses. He walked away from crowds. He refused to perform on demand. Not because he didn't care, because he would not let external pressure dictate internal alignment. Now here's the part that changes daily life. Reprogramming requires replacement rituals, not heavy ones, simple, repeatable anchors. For example, before input, alignment. After exposure, recalibration. Before sleep, reassurance. These are not rules, they are stabilizers. When fear enters during the day, you don't suppress it, you reinterpret it. You remind your nervous system of truth. You don't say, this shouldn't be here. You say, this does not rule me. Jesus did this constantly. When accused, he stayed anchored. When misunderstood, he stayed aligned. When threatened, he stayed peaceful. Peace was not the absence of pressure, it was the presence of order. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Reprogramming feels boring at first because chaos is stimulating. Drama releases dopamine. Urgency feels important. Peace feels quiet. And quiet feels unfamiliar. Many people abandon alignment not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't excite the nervous system trained on chaos. This is why consistency matters. The nervous system must relearn safety. And safety is not intensity, it is stability. Jesus offered rest, not adrenaline. Come to me, all who are weary, not come to me for excitement. Now let's talk about self-talk. Self-talk is not neutral narration, it is programming language. Every sentence you repeat internally is teaching your brain what to expect. This always happens to me. I'm behind. I can't afford to fail. These are not observations, they are instructions. Jesus spoke differently. He named reality, but never crowned it. He acknowledged storms, but commanded peace. He recognized hunger, but declared provision. Words are not magic, they are direction. They tell the nervous system what to prepare for. Now here is the shift. Instead of trying to control every thought, you begin to curate your inner language. You become intentional with meaning. You don't deny difficulty, you deny despair authority. You don't deny risk, you deny fear leadership. This is what renewing the mind looks like in practice, not perfection, alignment. And alignment compounds. In the next part, we will address why people sabotage peace, how identity resists change, and why freedom often feels threatening before it feels safe. Because understanding resistance is the key to sustaining transformation. There's a moment in every real transformation that no one warns you about. It is not the moment of pain. It is not the moment of crisis. It isn't even the moment of revelation. It is the moment when peace begins and something inside you resists it. Not because peace is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. This is why many people sabotage their own healing. Not consciously, not intentionally, but neurologically, emotionally, spiritually. The nervous system does not seek truth first. It seeks familiarity. And for many people, chaos has been familiar for so long that calm feels unsafe. Scarcity feels normal. Urgency feels productive. Anxiety feels responsible. And peace feels suspicious. This is why some people, after aligning their mind, after filtering stimuli, after breaking old agreements, feel an unexpected discomfort. They ask themselves, why do I feel restless when nothing is wrong? Why do I feel guilty when I rest? Why do I feel exposed when I'm not afraid? The answer is simple and profound. Your identity was partially built around survival, and survival identities resist freedom, because freedom threatens old roles. If you are no longer anxious, who are you? If you are no longer struggling, what defines you? If you are no longer reacting, what drives you? Jesus encountered this constantly, not just in individuals, but in entire communities. People preferred familiar bondage over unfamiliar freedom, not because freedom was costly, but because it required identity redefinition. This is why Jesus' most intense resistance did not come from the broken. It came from those whose identity depended on the old system remaining intact. Now bring this inward. Some part of you learned to survive by being hyper-aware, by anticipating danger, by staying alert. That part is not evil. It was protective, but it is no longer meant to rule. And when it senses that control is being transferred to peace, trust, and alignment, it panics, not because you are in danger, but because it fears irrelevance. This is why freedom often feels dangerous before it feels safe. And this is why many people unconsciously recreate stress right after moments of clarity. They scroll, they worry, they replay conversations, they anticipate problems. Not because problems exist, but because the nervous system is trying to return to what it knows. Jesus understood this. This is why he never rushed people into change. He invited them. Follow me, not fix yourself. Following requires trust, and trust feels risky when control has been your survival tool. Now let's talk about identity. You are not just changing thoughts, you are changing who you believe you are. And identity changes lag behind behavior. You can act aligned before you feel aligned. This does not mean you are faking, it means you are retraining. The mind says, this is new. The nervous system says, is this safe? And repetition answers the question. Safety is learned. Peace is learned. Alignment is learned. Jesus did not promise instant comfort. He promised rest after trust. Come to me and you will find rest. Rest is not immediate. It is discovered. Now here is the final shift. You stop asking, how do I control my mind? And you start asking, who governs it? Because governance is not micromanagement, it is authority. Authority does not argue with every thought, it establishes order. Jesus did not chase storms, he commanded them. He did not debate fear, he replaced it with presence. He did not obsess over resistance, he stayed aligned, and resistance eventually lost power. Now let's bring everything together. You learned that you are constantly influenced. Influence becomes belief through repetition. Beliefs form agreements. Agreements shape identity. Identity drives behavior, builds reality. And you learned the most important truth of all. You are not obligated to host every thought that passes through your mind. You are not required to absorb every emotion in your environment. You are not destined to live a life written by fear, noise, or pressure. Your mind is not public property. It is sacred territory, and whoever governs it shapes your life. This is why Scripture says, "Guard your heart above all else," not because the world is evil, but because the heart is fertile, and what grows there becomes destiny. Now here is the final decision point. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now. You decide whether you will continue living reactively or intentionally, whether your mornings will begin with noise or with alignment, whether your thoughts will remain automatic or become examined, whether you will keep signing agreements you never read or begin choosing what you consent to. This is not about perfection, it is about posture. Every day you return to center. Every day you realign. Every day you choose who speaks first. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your inner climate changes. Peace stops feeling fragile. Clarity becomes normal. Fear loses its authority. Not because the world became safe, but because your mind became anchored. Jesus never promised a controlled world. He promised a governed mind. And that is enough. Now, before we close completely, take one final moment, not to think, to notice your breath. Notice the stillness underneath the words. Notice that nothing needs to be fixed right now. This is what alignment feels like. Not excitement, not intensity, order. And from order, life flows differently. If you carry one sentence from this entire journey, let it be this: you are not here to survive the world. You are here to govern your inner world and walk through the outer one with peace. This is not the end of a video. It is the beginning of a different way of living. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because truth, once recognized, quietly rearranges everything.